The military simulation froze. Dead silence. A critical Arabic command had been mistranslated, leaving a squad of soldiers standing there, utterly confused. Then, from the shadows near the doorway, a weathered voice cut through the tension. "Hold position, not advance," he said firmly. Every head turned in stunned silence. There, at the back of the room, standing among the cleaning equipment, was a 72-year-old man who had just stopped mopping the floor. Gray hair, blue janitor uniform, the name Robert stitched across his chest. The general walked toward him slowly, his boots echoing in the silence. "How the hell do you know that?" Robert took a deep breath, as if pulling memories from somewhere deep within. "I did this for 30 years before I started mopping these hallways. At Fort Richardson in southern Arizona, dawn breaks before the world is ready. Helicopters slice through the orange sky while soldiers are already pounding the training tracks, their sweat mixing with the fine desert dust. Amid all this precision machinery, there's an invisible workforce that keeps everything running smoothly. The janitors arrive at 5 in the morning. They scrub restrooms, empty trash bins, polish endless hallways. Nobody sees them. Nobody acknowledges them. They're ghosts in blue uniforms. Robert Mitchell has been part of this invisibility for the past 2 years. At 72, he pushes his cleaning cart down the same corridors where generals plan international operations. His co-workers respect him deeply. He's always punctual, unfailingly polite, never complains. To the outside world, Robert appears to be just another retiree working to make ends meet. But nobody suspects that behind those tired eyes lies a living archive, 3 decades of military intelligence experience. That particular morning, a massive joint simulation exercise was underway, involving 5 nations. Americans were coordinating seamlessly with Germans, Italians, French and Polish forces. The scenario: a simulated hostage rescue in hostile territory. Real-time multilingual communication was essential. Robert had just finished cleaning the adjoining room when he heard the first major problem. The automated translation system had converted hold position from Arabic to English as advance. The soldiers hesitated, confusion rippling through their ranks. In a real combat situation, several soldiers would have died instantly. "Stop everything," shouted the German major. Robert continued cleaning methodically, but his trained ears caught every single word. The error was elementary. "Damn it," growled General Richardson. "Call it off. We've got a system failure somewhere." Robert released his grip on the mop handle. He walked slowly toward the doorway and spoke clearly. "Hold position, not advance." Everyone turned in complete, stunned silence. "The issue isn't your system, sir. It's the contextual translation from Arabic." German Major Klaus Weber turned sharply to Richardson. "Who is that man?" "Never seen him before, but judging by that uniform, probably maintenance staff." The general stepped forward deliberately. "How the hell do you know that?" Robert took a deep breath, as if reaching into distant memories. "I did this for 30 years before I started cleaning hallways." The room erupted in whispers. "Retired Sergeant Robert Mitchell." Richardson looked up, bewildered. "Why the hell are you mopping floors?" Robert picked up his mop again. "Because I need to eat, sir." "Robert, would you consider helping with this exercise?" "If I can be useful, sir." "Useful? You might just save an exercise worth thousands of dollars." Robert returned to his unlikely new position. Standing among generals and colonels, his experienced fingers corrected commands, fine-tuned translations, guided complex protocols. Within 20 minutes, the simulation was running flawlessly. Soldiers from 5 different countries communicated without the slightest confusion. Maneuvers flowed like clockwork. The exercise was a complete success. Robert Mitchell was born in 1952 on a hardscrabble farm in Texas. At 18, he enlisted in the Army. The Cold War was intensifying rapidly. Young, intelligent, and blessed with an extraordinary gift for languages, he was immediately assigned to military intelligence. The 70s and 80s were incredibly intense decades. Missions in East Germany, covert operations throughout the Middle East, training local allies in dangerous territories. Robert spoke fluent Russian to spies in Berlin, negotiated delicate agreements with leaders in Afghanistan, and coordinated complex NATO operations in 7 different languages. He was respected, decorated, absolutely essential. In 1985, he married Martha, a dedicated military nurse. They had 2 children, Michael and Jennifer. The family moved constantly from post to post: Germany, South Korea, Saudi Arabia. By 1990, Robert had risen to the rank of first sergeant. He led critical intelligence units in Iraq and Afghanistan after 9/11. His detailed reports went straight to the Pentagon. Presidents received briefings based on his analysis. But at age 60, retirement came suddenly. Just like that, the man who once spoke directly to foreign generals found himself at home with no mission, no clear purpose. Martha tried desperately to cheer him up, but Robert felt completely lost. 5 years ago, Martha passed away from cancer. Robert fell apart completely. His military pension couldn't begin to cover the overwhelming medical debts. He sold their house and moved into a modest apartment in Sierra Vista, near Fort Richardson. He desperately needed work. He applied for military consultant positions, translation roles, instructor positions at local colleges, but the answer was always exactly the same. Too old. Your certifications are outdated. The market is incredibly competitive. Then one day, scanning job postings, he saw something. Janitor. Fort Richardson. Part-time. For 2 long years, Robert listened to conversations in languages he knew fluently, yet remained completely invisible, until one translation error changed absolutely everything. Because competence doesn't grow old. It simply waits for the right moment to shine. The next morning, Richardson called Robert into his office. "Take a seat, Sergeant." "I'm just Robert now, sir. Not after yesterday. I need you for another exercise Thursday. A simulation with NATO representatives, 12 countries involved." Robert hesitated slightly. "I still need to finish my cleaning shift." "Forget the cleaning. You'll be our temporary language consultant. $500 a day." "500? Sir, I make $80 a day as a janitor. I read your complete file last night. Your reports on ISIS cells were absolutely critical in 5 successful operations. Your analysis of intercepted communications in Kabul saved American lives." Robert looked down at his weathered hands. "That was a very long time ago. Knowledge doesn't expire, Sergeant. Especially yours." On Thursday, Robert showed up at the simulation center wearing a borrowed dress shirt. He didn't own proper military uniforms anymore. International officers from multiple countries arrived to evaluate complex protocols, multilingual communications, and crisis scenarios. Robert took a quiet position near the official interpreters. Within 2 hours, he had identified 17 critical translation errors, all stemming from a complete lack of military context. French Commander Captain Dubois approached Robert during a break. Impressed, Captain Dubois attempted to praise Robert in English. "Incredible, you don't even have an accent. You're better than any professional translator I've ever worked with." During lunch, international officers actively sought out Robert, not just for translation, but for guidance on regional nuances that only decades of field experience could possibly teach. From across the room, General Richardson watched it all unfold with growing amazement. At 5 in the afternoon, when the exercise concluded, he pulled Robert aside for a private conversation. "Sergeant, you just made possible the smoothest communication we've ever witnessed in a multinational exercise." "I was just doing my job, sir." "No. You performed the job of an entire team of translators and consultants, and you did it significantly better." Richardson took a deep breath. "I want to offer you a permanent position. Monday morning, 7 o'clock. Robert parked his 1992 Ford pickup in the same spot as always, but this time he didn't reach for the cleaning cart. Instead, he walked purposefully toward the Central Administrative Building. A brand new sign hung prominently on the door. Senior Strategic Consultant, Operational Linguistics, Sergeant Robert Mitchell. He paused thoughtfully in front of the sign. 2 years ago, he had felt invisible pushing mops down these corridors. Today he had his own office and access to classified communications. General Richardson greeted him personally. "Welcome to your new role, Sergeant. Your salary's been significantly increased, with additional benefits. You'll report directly to me on all international matters." Robert signed the paperwork with steady hands. "What's my first mission? Review all international communication protocols on this base. Identify critical weaknesses. Suggest concrete improvements. Train our translators. You have complete authority." That afternoon, Robert settled into his new office. The desk had been empty for months. He carefully arranged dictionaries in 7 languages, detailed maps, and military protocol manuals. In one corner, he placed a symbolic reminder, his blue janitor's uniform, to remind himself that a person's worth doesn't fade. even when they're far from the spotlight. At 6 in the evening, on his way out, he passed by the janitorial department. His former colleagues greeted him with genuine surprise and pride. "Robert, we heard about what you accomplished. You never stop amazing us. Congratulations. Thank you, everyone. Get some rest. We all deserve it. See you tomorrow." Rumors spread like wildfire throughout the base. In the mess hall, soldiers whispered constantly, "Did you hear? The old janitor became a sergeant overnight. What's that about? Must be some friend of the commander. No way. Nobody promotes a janitor to strategic consultant just like that." The reactions were decidedly mixed. Younger officers showed visible discomfort. Lieutenant Patterson, 38 years old, West Point graduate, was particularly vocal. "This is absolutely ridiculous. I have a master's degree in international relations, and it's taken me years to reach a consultant role. Now a janitor becomes senior consultant in a single week." Major Davis chimed in supportively. "Probably a political move. An older veteran makes for excellent public relations." At the first team meeting, Robert faced the resistance head-on. Patterson challenged him directly in front of everyone. "Sergeant Mitchell, what's your academic background for this position?" Robert looked at him calmly. "The University of Real Life, Lieutenant. 30 years talking to people in the actual places where I was deployed. But do you have current certifications in simultaneous translation?" "No, sir." A heavy silence filled the entire room. Richardson stepped in firmly. "Lieutenant Patterson, Sergeant Mitchell, holds field credentials that no textbook can possibly offer." After the meeting, Robert approached Patterson directly. "Lieutenant, you were absolutely right to ask about qualifications. That shows you're a responsible officer." Patterson looked genuinely surprised. "But competence doesn't come only from diplomas. It comes from experience under intense pressure. I'm not here to compete with you. I'm here to contribute and share what I've learned." Patterson's hostility began to fade noticeably. It was as if Robert's words had revealed something deeper to him. True leadership builds bridges where others dig trenches. Robert's first challenges in his new role arrived fast and furious. The first week was absolutely brutal. He received 47 communication protocols to review technical documents in German, French, Arabic, and Russian, material that had accumulated mistakes for years. He worked 12 hours daily. At night, in his modest apartment, he spread papers across his kitchen table, stacks of technical dictionaries, open military manuals, and a borrowed base laptop running late into the evening. The first real conflict came on Wednesday. General Bradford, head of operations, questioned a correction Robert had made to a Russian protocol. "Sergeant Mitchell, I noticed you altered some field terminology. How do you know that's correct?" "Because I personally observed Russian soldiers respond differently to those specific terms in Chechnya back in 1999. "Excellent. Carry on, Sergeant." But not all officers supported Robert's presence. Major Collins, a former official translator, felt genuinely threatened. "Richardson is making a serious mistake. That man doesn't have formal academic credentials. He could trigger a diplomatic incident if he makes one slip." Collins began quietly pressuring other officers, forming a subtle resistance movement. On Friday, he made his move during a critical video conference with German commanders. Collins deliberately forgot to inform Robert of last-minute protocol changes. Robert improvised flawlessly, but Collins later used this to undermine him. "See? He wasn't properly prepared. That's completely unprofessional." General Richardson heard the rumors and called Collins in immediately. "Major, what's your issue with Sergeant Mitchell?" "I have no personal issues, sir. Only legitimate professional concerns." "What specific concerns?" "He didn't follow standard procedures during that video call. That meeting was successful precisely because you failed to inform him of the procedures." Collins went visibly pale. "Sir, Major Collins, Sergeant Mitchell has my complete support." After Collins left, Richardson called Robert in. "Did you know he was actively sabotaging you?" "I suspected." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because insecure men expose themselves eventually. You just have to give them enough rope." Richardson smiled knowingly. "And how did you handle that video call so well without proper preparation?" "General, I learned to improvise when lives depended on it. A video meeting doesn't even come close to what I've faced." 3 weeks later, the real test arrived unexpectedly. A serious diplomatic crisis erupted. American and German soldiers had a significant misunderstanding during a joint exercise in Poland. Cultural miscommunications escalated rapidly, nearly leading to a physical confrontation. The incident threatened to damage NATO relations permanently. General Richardson called an emergency meeting. "We need someone to travel to Poland immediately and fix this situation. Who has the experience and diplomatic skill to mediate an international conflict?" All eyes turned instinctively to Robert. "Sergeant Mitchell, will you take this on? When do I leave?" "Tonight." Robert flew to Ramstein Air Base in Germany, then traveled by military vehicle into Poland. When he arrived at the Polish base, the atmosphere was incredibly tense. American and German soldiers barely acknowledged each other. Commanders were holding completely separate briefings. Cooperation had collapsed entirely. Robert requested an immediate joint meeting with all parties involved. "Gentlemen, I'm Sergeant Robert Mitchell, consultant from Fort Richardson. I'm here to understand exactly what happened." American Commander Sergeant Williams spoke first. "The Germans accused us of ignoring safety protocols, but we followed our standard procedures precisely." German Commander Major Mueller fired back angrily in German. Robert turned to the Germans and replied fluently in perfect German. Mueller was visibly surprised to hear such flawless German pronunciation. Robert spent the next 2 hours mediating carefully, switching seamlessly between English and German. He listened intently, clarified misunderstandings, and translated not just words, but genuine intent and cultural context. Eventually, he uncovered the root of the entire problem: a simple difference in interpretation of the phrase, standard safety procedure. For Americans, it meant a well-established routine. For Germans, it referred to the absolute minimum mandatory protocol. Robert addressed both groups directly. "You're fighting over semantics, not real operational differences. You both want maximum security. You simply use different terminology." He proposed new common terminology: enhanced security protocol in English, verstärktes Sicherheitsprotokoll in German. Within 3 hours, the conflict was completely resolved. Mueller approached Robert personally. Williams also thanked him warmly. "Sergeant Mitchell, you saved our partnership with the Germans." Back at Fort Richardson, Robert handed a detailed report to Richardson. "Excellent work, Sergeant." The Germans sent official praise. "They said you were diplomatically brilliant and culturally respectful. I just did what anyone properly doing their job would have done." "No, Robert. You did what only you could possibly do." From that day forward, nobody questioned Robert Mitchell's competence again. His phone rang constantly with consultation requests from other military bases. International commanders specifically requested his presence in joint exercises. Young officers actively sought his guidance. Respect earned through results, not titles. Because competence speaks louder than any speech, and experience should matter more than any diploma. 1 week after returning from Poland, Robert found a plain envelope on his desk. No return address, just for Sergeant Mitchell handwritten on the front. He opened it curiously. "Sergeant Mitchell, you don't know me. I'm Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez, retired 3 years ago. I work as a night security guard in Phoenix. I heard your incredible story through a friend who serves at Fort Richardson. How you went from janitor to strategic consultant. Sir, that story changed my entire life. I felt completely invisible since retiring, as if my 22 years of military service meant absolutely nothing in the civilian world. I was seriously considering giving up on finding better employment. Your story showed me that our experience has genuine value, that veterans can still contribute meaningfully even when the world sees us as too old. Today, I applied for a private security instructor position. I mentioned my military background with pride, not shame. I don't know if I'll get the job, but I know your story gave me the courage to try. A grateful veteran, Carlos Rodriguez." Robert read the letter 3 times. His hands trembled slightly on the 3rd reading. He hadn't expected this reaction. He was simply trying to do his job, earn his paycheck, stay relevant. He never imagined his story would inspire other veterans. That night at home, Robert wrote a careful reply. "Sergeant Rodriguez, your letter moved me deeply. You're absolutely right. Our experience has immense value. Sometimes all we need is someone who looks past the uniform we wear now and sees who we really are. Please keep me updated on your application. And remember, you are not alone. Thousands of veterans face these same challenges. Maybe it's time we do something concrete about that. With respect, Sergeant Robert Mitchell." As he sealed the envelope, Robert had a sudden revelation. His promotion wasn't just about him personally. It was about all the veterans who still have so much valuable experience to offer. Robert shared his expanding vision with General Richardson. A few weeks later, he was called into a special meeting with commanders from Fort Benning, Fort Bragg, and Fort Leavenworth. "Sergeant Mitchell," Richardson began, "your work here has impressed top command throughout the military. We want to expand your program to other bases and create a comprehensive network of veteran consultants. We need specialists to identify retired personnel with underused skills and integrate them into strategic roles." Robert leaned forward attentively. "Excellent concept, General." General Morrison from Fort Bragg added enthusiastically. "Exactly. We want you as the national coordinator." "And my current role here?" Robert asked. "You'd keep it, but with significantly broader scope. You'd divide your time between Fort Richardson and other bases, implementing the veteran reintegration program nationwide." Robert paused thoughtfully. "And what exactly would you want me to accomplish?" "Identify overlooked talent, create comprehensive assessment processes, establish reintegration criteria, transform a pilot program into national policy." Robert thought immediately of Carlos Rodriguez, the retired sergeant who had written to him. How many more were out there exactly like him? "I accept on one condition." "What is it?" "I want complete autonomy to hire my own team." "Agreed." 2 months later, Robert launched the Veteran Specialist Reintegration Program, known as VSRP. His first hire, Carlos Rodriguez, now Regional Security Coordinator in Phoenix. Within 6 months, VSRP had successfully reintegrated 327 veterans into strategic positions. The financial savings for the government, $12 million annually from avoided external consulting fees. The gain in expertise, immeasurable. But Robert measured success completely differently. Every week he received heartfelt letters from reintegrated veterans, stories of men and women who had regained their professional dignity, their sense of purpose, their lost identity. One letter particularly stayed with him. "Sergeant Mitchell, I'm Maria Santos, former logistics sergeant. I'd been waiting tables for 3 years. Thanks to VSRP, I now coordinate supplies for NATO exercises. My 12-year-old daughter asked me yesterday, 'Mom, why are you smiling more lately?' I told her, 'Because I remembered who I am. Thank you for reminding us that we're not invisible.'" Maria. 5 years later, at age 77, Robert decided to retire permanently. Not because he couldn't continue, his mind remained razor sharp, his skills intact, but because he felt he had planted enough seeds for the forest to grow independently. The retirement ceremony took place at Fort Richardson, where it had all begun. In attendance, the Secretary of Defense, commanders from 15 military bases, thousands of veterans impacted by VSRP, family and friends. The main courtyard was decorated with flags from every country Robert had worked with over 5 decades. General Richardson, now nearing his own retirement, gave the keynote speech. 5 years ago, Robert Mitchell was mopping these very hallways. Today, he has fundamentally transformed how our nation sees and values retired veterans. Over 10,000 veterans and family members have been reintegrated through his programs. Hundreds of millions of dollars saved. But numbers don't capture the true impact. Dignity restored, purpose renewed, lives completely transformed. Wearing his uniform one final time, Robert stepped up to the podium. He hadn't prepared a lengthy speech. That was never his style. "When I started cleaning these hallways, I thought my career was over, that I had lost everything that once defined me." He looked out into the crowd, recognizing countless familiar faces. "I've learned that true identity doesn't come from a uniform or a rank, and that real experience never expires. It simply waits for the right moment to speak. Wisdom doesn't retire, because true competence transcends age. We veterans carry decades of knowledge that no university can teach, the kind of knowledge only real life provides. Because real veterans don't need to prove their worth, they just need the opportunity to show it. My final mission is this: to remind every veteran that their story doesn't end with retirement. It just begins a new chapter." After the ceremony, Robert walked alone through the same halls he once cleaned. The janitorial department still operated in the same location. He stopped at the doorway and greeted the current janitors warmly. "Mr. Robert." "Mary," one of them, called out. "We heard about your retirement." "Thank you. Thank you, Mary. You never forgot about us." "How could I? You taught me that dignity and honor don't come from position, but from character." Robert pulled out his blue janitor's uniform, still hanging carefully in the closet. "Mary, may I leave this here?" "Of course, Mr. Robert. It would be an honor." Walking to the parking lot, Robert reflected on the incredible journey. Driving home from work for the very last time, he smiled genuinely because he knew he had left behind a lasting legacy. And it wasn't about countless personal achievements. True legacies aren't measured in titles. They're measured by how many lives you transform and how many doors you open for others. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments. Click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next inspiring story.